Western medicine stands above the rest of the world in acute and emergency care. For life-threatening illnesses or traumatic injuries, conventional interventions save millions of lives that would have been lost even a generation ago. This same model encounters structural limitations when applied to chronic conditions like obesity, diabetes, and depression. The tools built for a trauma ward are ill-equipped for pathologies that build slowly over decades. The BIOWell analysis identifies psychophysiological abnormalities at an early stage. This allows practitioners to recommend specific countermeasures before a chronic condition takes hold of the system. Wellness requires looking at the body as an interconnected web of systems. From this perspective, treating an isolated symptom is a failure to address the cascade of imbalances that created it. We map this psychophysiological stability using 4 load-bearing structures, or pillars. First is the endocrine system, an orchestra of glands and hormones. Second is the gastrointestinal tract, our primary exposure to systemic inflammation. Third is the autonomic nervous system, regulated through the spine. And fourth is a person's level of emotional stress. These 4 systems are completely interdependent. Optimal health requires attending to them as a single, unified organism, rather than a collection of parts. Within this framework, emotional stress acts as the orchestra's conductor. If the conductor loses command, the musicians fall out of sync, and the biological columns collapse into systemic chaos. The endocrine system regulates the body's continuous processes. This includes cellular metabolism, the blood balance of nutrients and electrolytes, and the mobilization of defenses against external stressors. At the top of this hierarchy sits the hypothalamus. As the system's CEO, it controls autonomic reflexes and houses the body's biological clock, working in tandem with the light-sensitive pineal gland. The hypothalamus sends specific releasing factors to the anterior pituitary gland. The pituitary then issues directives to manage the rest of the peripheral endocrine glands throughout the body. Once an endocrine tissue secretes a hormone, it binds to a specific plasma protein carrier. This carrier protects the hormone and transports it through the circulatory system to distant target tissues. Systemic homeostasis relies on this top-down signaling hierarchy. A disruption at the level of the hypothalamus ripples downward, creating miscommunication across the entire body. When a threat triggers a fight-or-flight response, the adrenal glands deploy 2 primary hormones. Adrenaline acts as the initial trigger, while cortisol acts as a sustained projectile, continuing for hours. In a crisis, the body ranks survival over all other functions. To fuel the muscles and critical organs, the system redirects energy away from reproductive organs, converting sex hormones directly into stress hormones. Modern life constantly evokes this response without requiring physical exertion. Because adrenaline lacks an enzymatic switch to turn it off, it must be physically used or it remains active in the bloodstream. Constant stress creates abnormal levels of cortisol. While a healthy system buffers this excess, persistent hyperstimulation destroys the body's natural feedback loops entirely. The endocrine organs eventually begin to break down in a process called maladaptation. The adrenal glands, the body's shock absorbers, eventually exhaust their reserves and lose the ability to respond. As the primary shock absorbers of the body, the adrenal glands take the initial impact of any crisis. Chronic hyperstimulation eventually leads to exhaustion, making the adrenals the first system to break down in a stress cascade. When adrenal reserves drop, the body loses its cortisol buffer, forcing metabolic regulators to compensate. This shifts the burden of stability to the insulin-producing portion of the pancreas and then the thyroid. If the metabolic systems fail to restore balance, the breakdown reaches the biologically expendable reproductive organs, then the parathyroid and pineal glands, and finally the command centers in the pituitary and hypothalamus. As the hypothalamus is compromised, the production of corticotrophin-releasing hormone, or CRH, is affected. Because CRH controls fear, abnormal levels manifest as debilitating psychological symptoms, keeping the patient in a state of panic. The thyroid, normally responsible for regulating glucose metabolism, is continually forced into overstimulation during these chronic stress states, leading to severe cellular depletion. Deep, unshakable fatigue is rarely a symptom of just one malfunctioning gland. It is a systemic marker indicating that the entire cascade of maladaptation has finally reached a critical deficit. The suprachiasmatic nucleus acts as the brain's master clock. It interprets signals of light and darkness to regulate the release of hormones and dictate our sleep-wake cycles. Photoreceptors in the eyes and skin are highly sensitive to blue light. This specific wavelength informs the circadian clock that it is daytime, triggering the release of active, energetic hormones. This chart shows the normal 24-hour variation of salivary cortisol. Notice the high peak first thing in the morning at nearly 25 nanomoles per liter, and the decline to an almost undetectable trough of 0.8 by midnight. Because this range is so wide, a standard measurement taken at a random moment provides almost no useful clinical information. The diagnostic value lies in tracking the variation throughout the day. When we disrupt our natural light-dark cycles, we confuse the master clock. This accelerates endocrine exhaustion, suppresses evening melatonin production, and increases chronic disease risk. Biological health is a dynamic, continuous rhythm. To understand a patient's true condition, we need diagnostic tools capable of visualizing these active patterns, rather than relying on isolated, static data points. We observe these energetic patterns through the Kirlian effect, a process that registers the glow emitted by objects placed in high-intensity electromagnetic fields. In clinical practice, this is known as electrophotonic imaging. It provides a non-invasive method for recording the subtle energetic signatures of human physiology. The BIOWell 3.0 software uses internet-based calibration to standardize these readings. This ensures that devices worldwide produce accurate, comparable parameters for deep data analysis. The result is the biogram, a visual, quantitative map of the human biofield that allows practitioners to evaluate the integrity of the 4 pillars in real time. When examining a biogram, a practitioner might identify irregular patterns in the thyroid area. However, armed with an understanding of the endocrine cascade, they know the root cause is often deep adrenal deficiency. The analysis program takes these mapped parameters and processes them to draw comprehensive conclusions about a person's exact psychophysiological state. With a clinical effectiveness rate of roughly 80%, this provides a reliable predictive window for doctors working within integrative medicine. BIOWell maps the architecture of stress to identify systemic weaknesses, facilitating the lifestyle and nutritional shifts needed to maintain harmony and prevent